If there's one thing I've learned about family, it's that nothing brings out people's true colors like money. Not love, not loyalty, not even blood, just cold, hard cash. I didn't always think this way. Growing up, I believed my family had my back. We weren't rich, but we weren't poor either. My parents worked hard to keep a roof over our heads, food on the table, and clothes on our backs. My siblings and I didn't get everything we wanted, but we had everything we needed. I was the youngest of 3 kids. My sister Lisa is 5 years older than me, and my brother Mark is 2 years older. From a young age, I could tell that money was a sensitive topic in my house. My dad always worried about bills, my mom stretched every dollar, and whenever I asked for something that wasn't a necessity, I got the same response: "We're not made of money." That phrase stuck with me. It made me realize that if I ever wanted a life where I didn't have to check my bank account before buying groceries, I'd have to earn it myself. And I did. Through hard work, smart investments, and yes, a little bit of luck, I built a comfortable life for myself. I started working straight out of college, climbed the corporate ladder, and invested every extra dollar wisely. While my friends were spending their weekends partying, I was reading about stocks, real estate, and passive income. Eventually, my investments paid off, and I hit a level of financial success that my family had never seen before. At first, my parents were proud. My mom bragged to her friends about how well I was doing. My dad said I was proof that hard work pays off. Even my siblings seemed happy for me, until they realized that my success meant I no longer struggled like they did. That's when everything changed. It started subtly. Little comments here and there. Must be nice to not have to worry about money like the rest of us. Some of us actually have to work for a living. You don't get it, because you've never had to struggle. At first, I brushed it off. I thought they were just joking. But the more successful I became, the more bitter their jokes got. Suddenly, it felt like my achievements weren't something to be celebrated. They were something to be resented. It wasn't just my siblings either. My cousins, aunts, uncles, people I barely saw, started treating me differently. Family gatherings turned into passive-aggressive competitions where I was the unspoken villain. It was like they saw my success as a betrayal, as if I had abandoned them by choosing a different path. The most frustrating part? They acted like I had somehow cheated my way into financial stability, as if I had skipped the struggle they had to endure. But they didn't see the late nights, the sacrifices, the risks I took to get here. They only saw the end result. For a while, my parents stayed neutral. They didn't say much when my siblings complained about me, and I thought maybe they understood my perspective. But then, the gossip got to them. I started noticing a shift in how they treated me. My dad, who used to call me for advice, now barely spoke to me unless it was about family obligations. My mom, who used to light up whenever I visited, now made little comments about how I should stay humble. One night, during dinner at their house, my mom sighed and said, "You know, just because you have money now doesn't mean you're better than the rest of us." That caught me off guard. I had never once acted like I was better than anyone. I never flaunted my wealth, never made them feel less than. I still lived a relatively simple life compared to what I could afford. But in their eyes, just the fact that I had money made me different. That night, I started to realize something. My family didn't just see me as their son or brother anymore. They saw me as something else, something other. And that realization stung. Then came the inheritance conversation. I never expected an inheritance from my parents. I never even thought about it. They weren't millionaires. Their house, savings, and a few assets were all they had. And I never felt entitled to any of it. But one day, my dad casually mentioned that they were updating their will. And in that same breath, he added, "We've decided to leave everything to Lisa and Mark. You don't need it." Just like that. No discussion. No consideration. Just a simple statement, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I was stunned. Not because I wanted their money, I didn't, but because of the principle of it. They had decided that I was too successful to be treated like an equal. Lisa and Mark sat across from me, completely unfazed. In fact, my brother smirked and said, "Yeah, dude, it only makes sense. I mean, if anything, you should be giving us money." That was when I realized how deep the entitlement ran. It wasn't just that my parents had decided to leave me out of the will. It was that my siblings fully expected it. They believed they deserved my parents' money more than I did, simply because they weren't as financially stable. I looked at my parents, waiting for some kind of justification. My mom simply said, "It's only fair." Fair? Fair would have been splitting it equally. Fair would have been acknowledging that I was still their son, no matter how much money I had. Fair would have been treating me like family instead of a walking ATM. But in their eyes, my success made me less deserving. That was the moment I realized my family wasn't counting on me to be a part of them anymore. They were counting my money. And if they thought I had too much to need them, then maybe it was time to show them exactly what that meant. A few weeks after my parents casually told me I wasn't included in their will, I got a text from my mom. "Mom, hey sweetheart, can you come over this Saturday? We want to have a family discussion." It sounded innocent enough, maybe even a little hopeful. A part of me thought, maybe they realized how unfair they were being. Maybe they want to talk about it and set things right. I should have known better. When I arrived at my parents' house, everyone was already there. My dad sat at the head of the table, his arms crossed. My mom was next to him, wringing her hands like she was nervous. Lisa and Mark were already seated, grinning like they were about to be handed a prize. Something felt off. "Glad you could finally make it," Mark said, leaning back in his chair. I checked my watch. I wasn't late. I hadn't even sat down yet, and I already felt like I was on trial for something. "What's this about?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. My dad cleared his throat. "We wanted to have a proper discussion about our estate. Your mother and I," he glanced at her for support. "We've made some decisions about the will, and we wanted to talk to you face to face." I already knew where this was going, but I let them speak. "We've decided," my mom began carefully, that since you're already financially stable, it only makes sense for Lisa and Mark to inherit the estate. There it was. Lisa smiled politely, pretending to be humble, but Mark didn't even try to hide his excitement. He let out a chuckle and said, "Honestly, man, I don't even know why we're talking about this. You should be leaving us money instead." I turned my head slowly to look at him. "Excuse me?" He smirked, "Since you're the rich one and all." I felt my jaw tighten. I looked at my parents, expecting them to at least acknowledge how messed up that was. But they just sat there. My dad had the nerve to nod, as if Mark had made a reasonable point. "This isn't about playing favorites," my mom added quickly, sensing my frustration. "It's about what makes the most sense. Lisa and Mark are struggling, and you don't need anything from us." I let out a slow breath. "You're right," I said evenly. "I don't need anything from you. That's not the point." My dad sighed, rubbing his forehead like I was being difficult. "Look, son, you've done well for yourself. You have a good job, investments, a nice place to live. But your siblings," he gestured toward them. "They're still trying to find their footing." Lisa nodded as if that explained everything. "Exactly. Mark and I have real financial pressures. You wouldn't even feel the difference if you inherited something, but for us, it could change everything." Mark, never one to miss an opportunity to take a jab, added, "Besides, dude, you're always talking about how money isn't everything, right? So why are you making a big deal out of this?" I let that sink in for a moment. This wasn't just about the money. It was about how they saw me. "So let me get this straight," I said, keeping my voice controlled. "Because I worked hard and made something of myself, you've decided that I don't count? That my contributions to this family don't mean anything?" My dad shifted in his seat. "That's not what we're saying." "Then what are you saying?" I challenged. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like I'm being punished for not struggling." Lisa shook her head. "It's not a punishment. It's just what makes sense." I turned to my mom. "So if I lost all my money tomorrow, would you rewrite the will again?" Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. My dad avoided eye contact. "That's what I thought," I muttered. For the first time, it truly hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. They had thought this through. They had discussed it and decided that I was less of a priority. Not because of love. Not because of fairness. And the worst part, they didn't even see how wrong it was. I stood up. "Well, thanks for letting me know. I guess I know where I stand now." "Oh, don't be dramatic," Mark scoffed. "You're still part of the family." I let out a dry laugh. "Funny, because it sure doesn't feel like it." Lisa rolled her eyes. "Come on, don't make this into a thing." "A thing," I repeated, shaking my head. "You guys sat me down for a family discussion when the decision was already made." This wasn't a discussion. This was an ambush. My mom reached out as if to calm me. "Sweetheart, don't leave like this," but I was already heading toward the door. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I even had a family anymore. After that so-called family discussion, I decided to keep my distance. I didn't block anyone or cut them off completely, but I stopped going out of my way to visit. If they needed me, they could reach out. But deep down, I already knew they wouldn't, at least not for anything other than money. What I didn't expect was how quickly my siblings would start acting like they had already inherited everything. They act like the money is already theirs a week after the ambush. Lisa posted on social media about finally getting what she deserves and how life is fair sometimes. The comments under her post were filled with congratulations from friends and distant relatives. Mark, never one to miss an opportunity to rub salt in the wound, sent me a text. "Mark, dude, I was looking at some new cars today, thinking of getting a luxury SUV with my share. You think mom and dad's house will sell for a good price?" I stared at my screen in disbelief. "Me, you do realize mom and dad are still alive, right?" He responded with a laughing emoji and the words, "Relax, man. It's just hypothetical. But hey, when the time comes, you should help me pick out a good investment property." I didn't reply. There was no point. To him, and apparently to Lisa too, this was already decided. In their minds, my parents' assets were as good as theirs, and I wasn't even a consideration anymore. Family gatherings become a nightmare a few weeks later. I made the mistake of attending a family dinner. I thought maybe things would have settled down, that we could just be normal again. I was wrong. The second I walked in, Lisa greeted me with a sweet, fake smile. "Oh wow, look who decided to show up. I thought you were too busy counting your money." Mark laughed. "Nah, he just wants to check out the family estate before we take over." Their spouses chuckled along, clearly enjoying the show. I ignored them and sat down, trying to keep the peace. But the comments didn't stop. Lisa's husband made a joke about how they'd finally be able to upgrade their house once things get sorted out. Mark's wife, sipping her wine, smirked and said, "Must be nice to have so much money that you don't even care about family inheritance." Every conversation, every comment was a jab. At one point, Lisa turned to me and asked, "So what are you planning to do with all your wealth? Since, you don't have a family to pass it down to." I looked at her, then at my parents. They sat quietly, pretending not to hear. That's when I realized something important. They weren't going to defend me. Not once did my parents tell my siblings to stop. Not once did they try to shut down the passive-aggressive comments. They just let it happen. I finished my meal, thanked my mother for cooking, and left. A few days later, my dad called me. "You left early the other night," he said, his voice flat. "Yeah," I replied. Wasn't really in the mood to be mocked at my own parents' table. He sighed, like he was dealing with a child throwing a tantrum. "Oh, come on, your brother and sister were just joking around. You're being too sensitive." "No," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm being disrespected." Silence. Then he scoffed. "You know what? You're ungrateful." I almost laughed. "Ungrateful?" "Yes," he said firmly. "Your mother and I raised you, supported you, and now you have the nerve to act like a victim, just because we made a reasonable decision about our estate." I shook my head. "Dad, it's not about the money. It's about the fact that you and Mom made it clear that I don't matter as much as Lisa and Mark. Of course you matter, he snapped, but you don't need anything from us. I sighed. You just don't get it. And I realized then he never would. Later that night, my mom called. I almost didn't pick up, but I knew she'd just keep trying. She didn't waste any time. Sweetheart, why can't you just be happy for your brother and sister? I clenched my jaw. Mom, would you be happy if I completely cut you out of something just because you weren't struggling? That's not the same, she said softly. They need the help. You don't. I exhaled slowly. So let me ask you this. If I had failed in life, if I was broke, would you have given me a share? She hesitated. We would have helped you, of course. But because I succeeded, you decided I deserve nothing. She didn't answer. I have to go, I said, ending the call before she could try to spin things further. A week later, I visited my parents' house again, mostly to check on my mom. I had been avoiding family events, but I didn't want her to think I was completely gone. That's when I overheard it. Mark and Lisa were talking in the living room, and they didn't know I was nearby. Mark laughed. I bet if he lost everything tomorrow, he'd come crawling back to us. Lisa snorted. Yeah, and you know Mom and Dad would just let him. They'd act like he was one of us again. One of us. Like I wasn't part of the family anymore. Like I only had value if I struggled. I felt something in me snap. I walked in, making my presence known. Lisa and Mark both flinched when they saw me. Good to know where I stand, I said calmly. Lisa quickly forced a smile. Oh, come on. We were just joking. Sure, I said, turning to leave. As I walked out, I made a decision. If they thought I was so rich that I didn't need their money, then I'd show them exactly what that meant. From now on, they were on their own. I took a few days to cool off after overhearing Mark's comment. I wanted to make sure that when I confronted my family, I was calm, collected, and completely in control. Because this time, I wasn't just going to argue. I was going to give them exactly what they wanted. On Saturday, I went to my parents' house again. This time, I didn't come to listen to excuses or guilt trips. I came to make things crystal clear. When I walked in, my mom smiled like nothing had happened. Oh, sweetheart, you're here. I was just making some coffee. Do you want a cup? I shook my head. No, I won't be staying long. That got their attention. My dad looked up from his newspaper, raising an eyebrow. Lisa and Mark were there too, lounging on the couch, completely relaxed. They had no idea what was coming. I took a deep breath and said, I just wanted to come by and tell you all something. I've had time to think about everything, and I've decided to fully accept your decision about the inheritance. Mark smirked, like he had won some kind of competition. Lisa just gave a small nod, as if this was the natural outcome. My mom sighed in relief. Oh, honey, I'm glad you understand. It's really what's best for everyone. I smiled back. Yeah. And that's why from now on I assume you won't need my financial help anymore. Mark's smirk twitched slightly. Lisa blinked. My dad slowly lowered his newspaper. My mom was the first to speak. What do you mean? I crossed my arms. I mean, if I'm too successful to need an inheritance, then I assume you all think you're too independent to need my money either, right? I let that hang in the air for a second before continuing. For years I've been helping out, I said. Let's go down the list, shall we? I turned to my parents. I've been paying your property taxes for the last 3 years because you said it was too stressful to keep up with. I covered Mom's medical bills when insurance didn't. I paid off the last chunk of your mortgage to make sure you wouldn't have to worry about it in retirement. My mom's face went pale. My dad's jaw tightened. I turned to Lisa. I loaned you money when your business was struggling. I never asked for it back. Lisa suddenly found something very interesting about the floor. And then I turned to Mark. And you. I bailed you out of credit card debt twice. I helped you with rent when you couldn't afford it. And I even paid off your car loan after you lost your job for a few months. Mark's face turned red. Why are you bringing that up? Because, I said, you all made it very clear that I don't need anything from this family. Which means this family doesn't need anything from me either. The freakout begins. Lisa was the first to react. Wait, hold on. That's different. Helping family is not the same as getting an inheritance. Really? I tilted my head. Because it sounds exactly the same to me. You guys decided I didn't deserve anything because I was financially stable. Well, guess what? You guys aren't struggling either, not as long as I keep covering for you. But now, that stops. Mark shot up from the couch. Are you kidding me? I thought you were family. I let out a short laugh. Oh, now I'm family? A few days ago you said if I lost everything I'd come crawling back. Guess what? I'm making sure that never happens. My dad finally spoke up, his voice tight. You can't be serious about this. I shrugged. I'm completely serious. You guys don't think I need anything from you? Fine. I don't need you to need anything from me either. My mom's voice wavered. You wouldn't actually do that to us, would you? I turned to her. Would you have actually left me out of the will? She flinched. That's not, no, I cut in. It's exactly the same thing. You made a choice. I'm making mine. Mark's voice rose. So you're just gonna abandon us because you're mad? That's petty, man. I shook my head. No, what's petty is treating your brother like an ATM and still acting like you deserve more. Lisa tried to sound reasonable. Okay, maybe we should all just calm down and talk about this. I smiled. Oh, now you want to talk? Where was this energy when you were celebrating getting everything while I got nothing? She fell silent. I stepped toward the door, turning back one last time. You guys wanted me to act like I have too much money to care, right? I gestured around. Congratulations, you got your wish. With that, I walked out. No yelling, no slamming doors, just silence. I expected my phone to blow up after that, and it did. First, Lisa sent a long text about how I was being unfair and that family should support each other. Mark just sent angry messages calling me selfish and childish. And my mom? She left a voicemail, her voice shaking as she asked, can we just talk? But I didn't reply, because for the first time in a long time I felt truly free. I knew my family wouldn't take my decision well, but I wasn't expecting the fallout to hit so quickly. At first, it was quiet. Too quiet. No calls, no texts. For a brief moment, I thought maybe they had finally realized I was serious, that they were going to respect my decision. Then my phone started blowing up. The first call came from Mark. I didn't answer. Then another. And another. By the fifth missed call, he left a voicemail. His voice was tense, almost panicked. Dude, this isn't funny. Call me back. I didn't. Then came the texts. Mark, so you're really gonna do this? Just cut off your own brother. Mark, you're acting like a spoiled brat, man. Mark, I hope you know you're tearing this family apart. Tearing the family apart? That was rich, coming from the guy who had been celebrating my exclusion from the will. Then, the real reason for his anger finally slipped out. Mark, I thought you were still gonna help with rent this month. Ah, there it was. Turns out, Mark wasn't just upset about my decision, he needed me to keep bailing him out. I didn't reply. Lisa was more strategic. She didn't blow up my phone like Mark did. Instead, she sent a carefully worded text, clearly designed to push my buttons. Lisa, I don't understand why you're being like this. We're family. Families support each other. I stared at the screen, shaking my head. Where was all this family support when they were happily cutting me out of everything? When they laughed at the idea of me needing them? Still, I didn't respond. She sent another text an hour later. Lisa, you're proving us right, you only care about money. I sighed. They really had no idea. I had never cared about the money. It was about the principle. And the fact that they still couldn't see that, it only made me more certain that I had done the right thing. For the first few days, my parents didn't contact me. It was unusual. My mom especially had a habit of reaching out after any family drama, trying to smooth things over with a heartfelt talk. But this time, nothing. Maybe, for once, they were actually respecting my boundaries. Then I got the email. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" I hesitated before opening it. It was long, paragraphs upon paragraphs of carefully chosen words. She started by saying she never meant to hurt me, that she never wanted to push me away, that she hated the idea of our family being divided. But then, of course, she turned it around on me. She said she wished I would understand why they made the will decision, that it wasn't personal, that I was lucky to be in a position where I didn't need help. Then came the classic guilt trip. Mom, this family has always supported each other. I don't want to see you walk away from that just because of a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? They deliberately decided I wasn't family enough to inherit anything. They made that choice, not me. I closed the email without responding. A week passed. Then I started hearing things through the grapevine. Mark was in trouble. I learned from a cousin that he had missed payments on his loans, that his landlord was already warning him about late rent, that his credit cards were maxed out. And of course, my parents were panicking. They weren't just worried about Mark, they were worried about how they'd have to step in to help. Because up until now, I had always been the one catching him before he fell, and now, I wasn't there. Despite everything, I agreed to attend a small family gathering. Part of me wanted to see how they'd act now that they knew I was serious. At first, it was awkward. My siblings barely looked at me. My mom kept glancing over, like she wanted to talk but didn't know how. My dad avoided eye contact. Then, near the end of the night, my dad pulled me aside. "I need to ask you something," he said, his voice quiet. I already knew what was coming. "Mark is in a bit of a rough spot," he continued. "Your mother and I are trying to help, but it's more than we can handle." I raised an eyebrow. Then, he said it. "Would you be able to loan him some money, just to get him back on his feet?" I blinked. Then, I laughed. Loud enough that Lisa and Mark turned their heads. "Why are you laughing?" my dad asked, looking genuinely confused. I shook my head. "I thought I wasn't part of the inheritance club." His expression darkened. "This isn't about that." "Oh, but it is." I gave him a knowing look. "You guys made it clear that I don't need anything from this family. So now I'm playing the part." He frowned. "That's different." "No," I said simply. "It's not." Then, before he could argue, I turned and walked away. Because for the first time in my life, I was finally done being their safety net. A few days after the family gathering, I got another message from my mom. "Mom, can we please just talk? I don't want this to go on any longer." I almost ignored it. I was exhausted from dealing with them, and deep down I knew nothing would change. But part of me was curious. Would they finally admit they were wrong? So I agreed. We met at my parents' house that weekend. Lisa and Mark were already there when I arrived, and the second I walked in, I could feel the tension in the air. My dad sat in his usual chair, silent and brooding. My mom looked nervous, wringing her hands. Lisa and Mark, they just looked irritated, like they were being forced to be there. I sat down, waiting. My mom took a deep breath. "We've been talking, and we realize now that maybe we shouldn't have handled things the way we did. Maybe." That one word already told me everything I needed to know. "But you have to understand," she continued, "when we made that decision, it just made sense at the time." I raised an eyebrow. "Made sense how?" She hesitated, glancing at my dad for support. He just stared at the floor. Lisa, on the other hand, decided to jump in. "You were already financially stable," she said, crossing her arms. "We weren't. It wasn't about trying to hurt you." Mark nodded. "Yeah, we actually needed the money. You didn't." I let out a small laugh. "Right. And what about now?" They didn't answer. I leaned forward. "Let's be real. You didn't expect me to actually cut you off. You thought I'd just keep handing out money like I always did, even after you made it clear that I wasn't worth including in the will." Lisa sighed. "Look, we get that you're upset." "I'm not upset," I interrupted. "I'm just done being played." Mark rolled his eyes. "Come on, man. You're acting like this is some big betrayal. It's not that deep." I turned to him. "You still don't get it, do you?" He frowned. "Get what?" "It was never about the money," I said. It was about respect. Silence. Lisa scoffed. Respect? Oh, please. You're mad because you didn't get a cut. I shook my head. No, I'm mad because I was treated like an outsider in my own family. You all made it clear that I didn't matter as much as you did. That my place in this family was tied to whether or not I was struggling. My mom spoke up again, her voice soft. That's not true, sweetheart. I looked her in the eye. Then why was I the only one left out? Her lips parted, but no words came out. I nodded. Exactly. Lisa sighed. Okay, look, maybe we were wrong to exclude you, but we can work something out. I frowned. What do you mean? She glanced at Mark, then back at me. We all know that things have been difficult lately, especially for Mark. Mark muttered. Thanks for throwing me under the bus. Lisa ignored him. The point is, we can figure out a way where you help with some of the family expenses, and in return, I raised my hand, cutting her off. Let me get this straight. You still want me to act like your personal ATM, but I still don't get treated as an equal? She hesitated. Well, when you put it like that, Pass, I said, standing up. Lisa's face twisted in frustration. Oh my God, why are you being so difficult? Because I finally see things for what they are, I said. You don't respect me. You just want my money. No real resolution. Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. This is exhausting. I looked at him. Tell me something. If I lost everything tomorrow, would you guys suddenly rewrite the will? Neither of them answered. I nodded. That's what I thought. My dad finally spoke. Are you really going to throw away your family over this? I exhaled. I didn't throw anything away. You did. My mom's eyes started watering. Please don't leave like this. I sighed. I don't want to be part of a family that only values me when it benefits them. Then, without another word, I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I just left. Because I was finally done playing their games. Walking out of my parents' house that day was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Not because I had any regrets, but because I knew that was the moment I truly let go of the idea that my family would ever change. So I moved on. At first, it felt strange. I had spent so much of my life tied to my family, constantly feeling like I had to prove my worth, like I had to earn my place among them. Now, I had no one left to impress. So I started focusing on the people who actually treated me with respect. My friends, real friends, not the ones who only called when they needed something. Colleagues who valued my hard work, who saw me as more than just a rich guy or a financial safety net. Even distant relatives, ones I barely spoke to before, turned out to be more supportive than my own siblings. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Months passed. My phone stayed quiet. I wasn't surprised. My family was stubborn, and I knew they wouldn't admit they were wrong anytime soon. But then I started hearing things through the grapevine. Mark was in serious trouble. His financial problems had gone from bad to worse. Apparently, he had taken out more loans, assuming he'd find a way to pay them off later. Except, later never came. He was defaulting on everything. Worse? My parents were panicking because they had used their own money to help him, and now they were also struggling. And suddenly, after all that time of pretending I didn't matter, they were rewriting their will again. One afternoon, I got a text from my mom. Mom, hey sweetheart, I miss you. Can we talk? I already knew where this was going. Still, part of me was curious. So I replied, me? About what? She hesitated before sending the next message. Mom, it's just things have been difficult lately. Your father and I have been thinking a lot about the family, about everything that's happened. Maybe it's time we make things right. There it was. The implied offer. They were struggling. Mark was drowning in debt. And now, suddenly, they wanted to make things right. Not because they actually regretted what they did, but because they needed something from me. I stared at the message for a few seconds before typing my response. Me, you already made your choice. Then, I put my phone down. Days passed. Then, my dad called. I let it ring. Voicemail. I played it back, hearing his familiar deep voice, more tired than usual. Look, I know you're upset, and I know we didn't handle things the best way. But at the end of the day, we're still family. We need to stick together. I shook my head, already knowing where this was going. I won't sugarcoat it. Things have been rough. Your brother is in a tough spot, and your mother and I are trying to keep everything together. We've been thinking maybe it's time to put everything behind us. Maybe you could come back into the family fold. There it was. Not an apology. Not an admission of wrongdoing. Just a request. Come back. Help us. Fix the mess we made. I took a deep breath, then hit call back. My dad picked up almost instantly. Son, I cut him off. You don't get to throw me away and pick me back up when it's convenient. Silence. Then, a quiet sigh. I see. Good, I said. Now you finally understand. And with that, I hung up. For the first time in my life, I knew they finally got it. They had treated me like an outsider. They had made me feel like I didn't belong. And now, they knew exactly what it felt like to be left out. And I was at peace with it. I'm a 23-year-old guy, and like most families, mine had its share of ups and downs. But overall, my parents seemed happy, and our family was close-knit. My dad was 52, and he's the kind of person everyone admires. He's the life of every family gathering, always cracking jokes, making everyone laugh, and being generally supportive. People respect him. He's the perfect husband and father, or at least that's what everyone thought. In our neighborhood, he's known as Mr. Reliable, the guy everyone could count on. Need help moving furniture? He's there. Hosting a barbecue? He'll man the grill. My mom, who's 50, is quieter, more reserved. She's warm and kind, but she's not in the spotlight like Dad. They've been married for over 25 years, and everyone says they're the perfect couple. I would have said the same too, until a few months ago. I started noticing that Dad had gotten really attached to his phone, always carrying it around or keeping it face down. He'd step out of the room to take calls or answer messages. It was subtle at first, maybe he's just busy, right? But he'd never been this secretive before. He started going out more too, with weak excuses that felt off. Stuff like, oh, I have to meet an old friend, or I need to run a quick errand. This wasn't like him, but I didn't think much of it at first. Then, one evening, he rushed out of the house, leaving his phone behind on the kitchen counter. I didn't mean to snoop, but a notification caught my eye. It was a message from someone named Lily, with a heart emoji. My heart skipped a beat. The text preview was something like, "Miss you already." I didn't open the message, but that small glimpse was enough to make my mind race. I wanted to believe it was just a friend, maybe a misunderstanding, but deep down, I had a sinking feeling that something wasn't right. When Dad got home, I decided to bring it up casually. I asked him who Lily was, trying to keep my tone light, like I wasn't suspicious. He brushed it off immediately, saying she was just an old friend, and that there was nothing to worry about. He looked almost annoyed that I'd even ask. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself that I was overthinking. But now that the thought had taken root, I couldn't just let it go. A few days later, I decided to dig a little deeper. I waited until Dad was out of the house again, and I managed to unlock his phone. I didn't feel great about it, but my curiosity, and maybe a little bit of fear, drove me. What I found was way more than I'd expected. There were dozens of texts between him and this Lily, and it wasn't just casual chat. They were talking about meeting up, shared memories, inside jokes. Some messages were affectionate, almost like they had their own secret world that didn't include us. As if that wasn't enough, I found emails too, hidden away in a separate account. There were pictures of them together, smiling and close, like a couple. Some of the emails went back years, detailing weekends away, dinner dates, even vacations. The weight of it all hit me hard. This wasn't a one-time thing. He'd been living a double life for years. I didn't know what to do, so I called my best friend, hoping he'd give me some clarity. He listened patiently, and his advice was straightforward. You have to confront him. You deserve to know the truth, and so does your mom. Hearing him say it made sense, but I wasn't sure I was ready for what might happen next. Still, I knew I couldn't sit on this forever. So a couple of nights later, I waited until Dad and I were alone. I confronted him directly, telling him I'd seen the messages, the photos, everything. He looked stunned at first, like he didn't expect me to find out. Then he got defensive, saying it was harmless, that it didn't change how he felt about the family. He practically begged me not to tell Mom, insisting that it would destroy her and that this was his personal business. But how could he say that? He made it sound like it didn't matter, as if having a secret relationship on the side didn't affect us at all. I didn't buy it, but his words left me conflicted. Part of me wanted to believe him, to protect Mom, to keep our family intact. But another part of me felt like he'd betrayed all of us, and Mom deserved to know the truth. The next few days were tough. I'd catch Dad acting like everything was normal, laughing with Mom, joking around. But every time I looked at him, all I could see were those messages and photos, proof of his lies. The weight of it was too much for me to carry alone. Finally, I decided that I couldn't keep this to myself. Mom had to know. She deserved to know the truth about the man she'd spent her life with. The night I told her was one of the hardest nights of my life. I barely got the words out, but I managed to explain what I'd found. She listened quietly at first, not really reacting. But as I showed her the messages, the photos, reality started to sink in. She looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under her. I wish I could say that telling her felt like a weight lifted, but it only made everything feel more real, more painful. Dad had been lying, not just to her, but to all of us for years. And now, nothing would ever be the same. Update 1. The morning after I told my mom, everything felt like stepping into a different world. The air in our house felt heavy, like everyone knew something had shattered but didn't want to look at the pieces. My mom didn't say much at first, just sat at the kitchen table, staring off into space. She kept shaking her head, like she could shake off the reality I just laid in front of her. She finally turned to me, her face pale, asking if it was all real. She wanted to believe there had to be a mistake. But I showed her the messages, the photos, the emails. Each piece of proof hit her like a physical blow, and with every swipe on the screen, the reality set in deeper. She looked at me, eyes filled with a mixture of pain and disbelief, and just broke. I'd never seen her like that before. She'd always been strong, quiet, but steady. This was different. By the time my dad came downstairs, the tension was thick enough to cut through. He walked in, immediately noticing the silence, and when he saw Mom's expression, he knew. She confronted him right there in the kitchen. He didn't deny it, but he tried to brush it off, claiming it was all in the past. He kept looking at me, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. It was like he couldn't believe I'd be the one to unravel everything. He even threw a comment about how I'd overreacted, saying I'd dug into his private life for no reason and blown things out of proportion. I didn't respond. I was too stunned to even form a thought. The arguments didn't stop there. Over the next few days, things only got worse. My siblings, a younger brother and sister, had no idea what was going on. When Mom finally told them, they didn't know whom to believe. Dad kept spinning his version of the story, claiming it had been a mistake from years ago, something I'd dug up and twisted. He painted me as the instigator, the one who'd blown everything out of proportion, and soon my siblings were caught in the crossfire, unsure if they could even trust me. Then, it got even messier. News somehow leaked to the extended family, aunts, uncles, even some family friends. Some relatives came to our side, supporting Mom and me, but others rallied around Dad, insisting I'd gone too far, that I shouldn't have meddled in adult matters. I overheard one of my uncles saying that I'd overstepped and disrespected my father by dragging everyone into his personal business. Somehow, it was as if I'd done something wrong just by bringing the truth to light. Mom started talking about divorce, though I could tell she was torn. She'd been with Dad for so long, and there was still a part of her that wanted to believe this was fixable. Dad latched onto that, making promises, insisting he'd changed, that there'd be no more secrets if we could just move past this. Some relatives even suggested therapy, hoping it might help them salvage their marriage, but every suggestion just felt like more pressure to put the pieces back together, as if we could just pretend this never happened. The pressure didn't just come from outside, though. My dad and I were barely speaking now, and when he did talk to me, it was only to remind me that I'd ruined his marriage. He stopped looking at me the same way. The anger in his eyes made it clear he blamed me entirely. And it wasn't just him. My relationship with my siblings started to crumble too. They resented me for exposing the affair, and their frustration was evident. They didn't see it as me standing up for Mom, they saw it as me tearing the family apart. As if things couldn't get more surreal, extended family members kept reaching out, pressuring me to let things go back to normal. I'd get phone calls from aunts and cousins, people telling me to just move on and keep the peace. They said I was too young to understand, that I couldn't see the bigger picture. They acted like my decision to tell Mom had been a reckless, selfish choice, as if I didn't understand the consequences. At one point, Dad even suggested we sit down as a family to work things out. But by now, his attempt to regain control over the situation felt hollow. It was like he was still trying to manage the fallout instead of facing the truth. And of course, Mom was getting pulled in every direction. She was trying to stay strong, but I could tell the weight of it all was tearing her down. Friends and family kept telling her to just forgive, to try to heal for the sake of our family. With every passing day, I felt more isolated. The pressure, the constant blame shifting, the emotional strain, it all started to get to me. I began to wonder if maybe everyone was right, if maybe I'd made things worse by telling Mom. What was once clear started to blur, and I was left questioning my own actions. The fallout was brutal. Dad stopped talking to me entirely, practically treating me like a stranger under our own roof. He moved out to the guest room, and every interaction was tense, like we were walking on broken glass around each other. The only time he engaged was to remind me of what I'd done to destroy his marriage, making sure I knew this was all my fault. I could see Mom struggling too. She was conflicted, torn between the love she still had for my dad and the betrayal she couldn't ignore. I didn't know what was worse, seeing her in so much pain or knowing that I was part of why she was going through it. And while she didn't blame me, the weight of her sorrow made everything feel heavier. In a few short days, our family had gone from the picture of stability to complete chaos, and I was stuck in the middle of it, with no idea if I'd done the right thing or if I'd just opened a wound that could never heal. Update 2. After the initial shock wore off, things took an ugly turn. I quickly realized that I wasn't just dealing with the fallout in our immediate family, I was dealing with the entire extended family, and almost everyone had a strong opinion on what I'd done. Instead of focusing on my dad's betrayal, the narrative started shifting. Dad was quick to tell anyone who would listen that I'd ruined his life, his reputation, and our family's peace. The worst part was that people actually listened. Some relatives stopped inviting me over, saying it was best for family peace. A couple of my aunts who'd been close to us growing up suggested that I'd taken things too far, that I should have let my parents handle things like adults. It stung, especially since I was the one trying to do what was right. Somehow, in all this, my dad was managing to spin the story as if I was the one in the wrong, that I'd exposed his personal matters out of some kind of malice. The word he used a lot was dramatic, claiming I'd blown things out of proportion. The whole family seemed divided. My siblings were torn, too. They tried to support both our parents, but in the end, they started to lean more toward Dad. They bought into his story that the affair was a small mistake that should have been kept private. One day, my younger brother even said that he wished I hadn't stirred things up because it felt like I'd made everything worse. That cut deep. My sister, on the other hand, kept switching between siding with me and defending Dad, like she couldn't quite decide. Trying to find some connection, I reached out to Mom, who was still reeling. She'd been quiet since the confrontation, but was slowly showing signs of coming around. We had a couple of talks where she actually thanked me for telling her the truth, though I could see the pain in her eyes every time we brought it up. She admitted she was scared of the financial strain, of being alone, of dealing with the fallout. But for once, she was starting to see the importance of standing up for herself, and she seemed to be considering her options, including the idea of divorce. But Dad was relentless. He started reaching out to family members, painting his affair as a mistake that I'd blown out of proportion, insisting that if it weren't for me, Mom would have never found out, and everything would be fine. The words he used were almost rehearsed, as if he'd thought through each phrase, each line, to make himself seem sympathetic. He kept saying I'd acted out of childish spite, that I was trying to destroy our family. Then, more secrets started surfacing. During one of my mom's conversations with her lawyer, she learned that Dad had been hiding financial issues. Apparently, he'd been lying about our savings, moving money around without telling her. When she brought it up with him, he tried to brush it off, claiming it was necessary for his business. Mom was shocked and furious, realizing this wasn't just a betrayal of the heart, it was a betrayal of her trust in every way. Things came to a head when some relatives organized a family meeting. They didn't invite me. The message I got from my cousin was that they wanted to discuss how to move forward peacefully. From what I heard afterward, the whole meeting was aimed at putting the family back together without addressing the actual issue. It was all about forgiveness, letting things go, and keeping the family intact, as if nothing had happened. They even suggested I should apologize to Dad for overstepping. That part baffled me. Apologize? For what? Exposing a lie that affected us all? Dad's control over the family finances came up again. He started using it as a threat, telling Mom that if she went through with any separation, she'd be left with almost nothing. He had control over everything, the bank accounts, the savings, even the house. The more Mom learned, the more anxious she became. She felt trapped, knowing she'd be financially dependent if she tried to break free. My siblings even begged me to stop stirring things up, as if keeping quiet would make everything better. Eventually, Mom decided to try therapy. She thought it might help her process everything, maybe even find a way to forgive. But Dad refused. He claimed he didn't need therapy, that it was unnecessary. He was still convinced he'd done nothing wrong, still blaming me for the chaos in our family. The strain was starting to get to me. I began to wonder if everyone was right, if maybe I'd just made things worse by exposing everything. The guilt and self-doubt were eating at me, especially with the constant reminders from family that I'd overstepped. Out of sheer frustration and isolation, I turned to Reddit, just to get it all out and see if I'd done the right thing. I laid out everything, the affair, the lies, the backlash from family. The responses were overwhelming. People who'd been through similar situations offered support, saying I wasn't wrong for telling the truth, that Mom deserved to know, that no one should be forced to live in a lie. Their words gave me a small sense of validation, like I wasn't as alone as I felt. But things at home continued to get worse. Mom was now worrying about the future, about how she'd manage financially if things continued down this path. Dad tightened his grip on everything related to money, leaving her dependent and fearful. He knew exactly what he was doing, making sure she couldn't leave, that she'd have to stay no matter what. And every time someone suggested therapy or a family meeting, he'd shoot it down, acting as if he was the victim in all this. In just a few short weeks, my entire world had flipped upside down. The family I thought was rock solid was suddenly fragile, held together by secrets and lies, and I was the one being blamed for tearing it apart. With Dad's control over the finances and the narrative he'd spun, I wasn't sure what would happen next. But one thing was clear, there was no going back to the way things were. Update 3. The situation continued spiraling, each day revealing new layers of betrayal. I felt like I was piecing together a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces, each discovery worse than the last. The money problems Mom had uncovered were just the beginning. She and I started going through old paperwork, bank statements, and transaction histories. That's when I stumbled across several accounts we'd never seen before. Accounts in Dad's name, filled with sums that didn't match anything we knew about our family's finances. These weren't just regular savings. It looked like Dad had been siphoning money into these hidden accounts for years. I found transfers from our main family account that matched suspicious withdrawals from his business accounts, funds that were meant for household expenses or saved up for my siblings and my education. He'd been redirecting the money, little by little, for who knows what purpose. This was no accident or oversight. It was intentional and carefully hidden. On top of that, we found records of sketchy business deals he'd made. There were payments to unknown entities and receipts for expenses that didn't line up with anything we recognized. Mom was devastated all over again, realizing the financial betrayal on top of the emotional one. Dad's excuses weren't holding up, and with every document we uncovered, it became clear that he'd been planning for a future without us in it. When Mom confronted him, Dad's reaction was explosive. He demanded we drop it immediately, saying he was tired of the witch hunt and refusing to explain himself. He claimed everything he did was necessary for his business, but when we pressed him for details, he clammed up, only giving vague answers and threatening to cut us off financially if we kept digging. The pressure was too much for my siblings, who turned on me yet again. They believed Dad's claim that he'd only set up those accounts to protect the family's future, insisting that I was making it worse by continuing to pry. They couldn't understand that this wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about deception on every level. But instead of seeing Dad's actions for what they were, they blamed me, saying I'd pushed Dad to this point. It wasn't long before even more extended family members sided against me. I became the scapegoat, the troublemaker who had stirred up chaos in an otherwise happy family. Relatives stopped reaching out, and the ones who did were quick to tell me that I should have kept quiet, that I was destroying everything. I could see the toll it was taking on Mom. She was losing family support left and right, and starting to feel like she was completely alone in this. I was the only one by her side, and while that gave her strength, it also weighed heavily on her. We discussed her options, and for the first time, Mom seemed genuinely ready to consider divorce. She wasn't just talking about it, she was seriously weighing her chances, wondering if she could protect herself and what little financial security was left. We reached out to a lawyer together. I figured if anyone could help us untangle the mess Dad had created, it would be a professional. The lawyer gave us a grim but clear picture of our situation. Dad held most of the assets and accounts under his control, and if Mom didn't act fast, she risked losing any claim to the money he'd hidden. Mom was visibly shaken, but this was the push she needed to finally take action. Around that time, she joined a local women's support group. I'd suggested it, hoping she'd find some solidarity and advice from people who'd been through similar situations. The group became a lifeline for her, and it was like I could finally see her regaining some of her lost confidence. She started setting small goals for herself, like managing her own finances and separating her assets from Dad's control. She was slowly coming back to life, with a determination I hadn't seen in her before. But as her strength grew, so did the family drama. Tensions boiled over at family gatherings. Dad started openly blaming me for ruining the family, making it clear to everyone in attendance that he held me responsible for everything falling apart. He'd twist the story to make himself look like the victim, portraying himself as a misunderstood husband who'd made a few mistakes. The family, most of whom were too uncomfortable to dig deeper, just nodded along, feeding into his narrative and solidifying their blame against me. Through all of this, Reddit became a strange source of comfort. I'd post updates there, and the responses kept me going. Strangers who'd been through similar situations offered words of encouragement and advice. Many told me I was doing the right thing by helping Mom, that exposing the truth was worth it, no matter how hard it got. The support reminded me that I wasn't the villain Dad made me out to be. One day, my younger brother reached out unexpectedly. He apologized, saying he hadn't fully understood my intentions, that he hadn't realized how much Dad had actually lied. It was the first time since everything started that one of my siblings acknowledged my side of the story. That apology felt like a breakthrough, a tiny glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, the family wasn't completely lost. Meanwhile, Mom took more steps toward financial independence. She opened her own bank account and started moving what little money she could into it, ensuring that Dad wouldn't have complete control over her finances. She was taking real, tangible steps to free herself from his grip, and I felt proud watching her slowly regain her autonomy. For the first time since this all started, there was a sense of possibility, a ray of hope that maybe we'd get through this, that the truth was worth fighting for. Mom was still in a painful, complex place, but with each small victory, she was reclaiming her life, and I was there to support her every step of the way. This fight wasn't over, but we were finally moving forward, together. Update 4. With all that had come to light, Mom decided to meet with a divorce lawyer. I sat with her in the office, feeling the weight of the decision she was about to make. The lawyer listened carefully as she explained everything: Dad's affair, the financial manipulations, and the hidden accounts. He nodded, then outlined her options for safeguarding what remained of her financial future. There was a clear path forward, but it wouldn't be easy. Seeing Mom absorb the information, I realized this was the first time she was taking active steps to break free from the control Dad had held over her for so long. Not long after that meeting, Dad seemed to sense the shift. He became aggressive, almost desperate, trying to discredit both of us in every way possible. He started spreading rumors among family friends and relatives, painting Mom as greedy, claiming she was trying to ruin him financially. To make matters worse, he labeled me as manipulative, telling everyone I had pushed her into making reckless decisions. Some family friends began looking at us differently, and we even started hearing whispers in the community. The people who once admired Dad now saw our family as divided, and everyone seemed to be choosing sides. The lawyer's investigation into our finances also uncovered more irregularities. Dad had been moving money around to other accounts for years, making small, regular transfers that, in total, added up to a significant amount. Mom was stunned. She had known about some of the money he'd kept aside, but this was on a different level. The lawyer's findings only hardened my resolve. I wasn't about to back down now. Dad's lies were coming out, one by one, and I was committed to seeing this through, no matter how hard he tried to manipulate us into silence. One evening, my siblings confronted me. They believed Dad's version of events, convinced I was pushing Mom toward divorce to destroy him. They looked at me like I was a stranger, telling me that if Mom went through with the divorce, it would ruin his life. They refused to see the deception for what it was, blaming me for pushing things too far. The division in our family was now deep, and it was becoming painfully clear that my siblings were unwilling to even consider that Dad might be at fault. In response to all this, Mom started taking steps toward independence. She began attending financial literacy workshops, learning how to manage her money and make smart financial decisions on her own. With the help of a financial planner, she created a roadmap for her future, one that didn't include Dad. For the first time in years, she was building a life she could control. I could see her confidence growing, and it was encouraging to watch her take charge of her own destiny, bit by bit. But while Mom was growing stronger, the extended family continued to fracture. Relatives began picking sides, with some expressing support for Mom, while others accused her of being spiteful for even considering divorce. The division was ugly, with relatives openly debating who was right and who was wrong, as though this was just a family drama for them to discuss over dinner. And then there were the messages. Dad started texting me, sending guilt-laden messages about how I'd broken up the family and ruined his life. He tried to make me feel responsible, painting himself as the victim, but the texts only strengthened my resolve. Mom began setting boundaries with Dad. She refused to let him twist her words or manipulate her emotions, making it clear that she was done with the lies. It was empowering to see her standing up to him, no longer willing to accept his excuses. Still, the stress was enormous. With rumors spreading in the community, even neighbors began to take sides, adding fuel to the fire. The pressure was weighing on Mom, but she was determined to see this through. I knew I needed support too, so I started therapy. The guilt, the strain of losing family members, and the constant tension were taking their toll. Therapy helped me process everything, and my therapist encouraged me to stand by the truth, even if it meant losing people along the way. Hearing that was a relief, a reminder that I wasn't alone in feeling overwhelmed. Then came the turning point. After weeks of back and forth with the lawyer and endless pressure from Dad, Mom decided to move forward with a formal separation agreement. It was her way of telling everyone, including herself, that she was ready to step away from the past and build a future for herself. The agreement would give her financial security, taking into account the money Dad had tried to hide, and it meant that she'd finally be free from his control. The news didn't sit well with my siblings. They came to me with an ultimatum: If I continued to support mom in her decision, they'd cut me off completely. To them, siding with mom felt like a betrayal of dad. They refused to see the truth and instead put all the blame on me. It was a painful moment knowing they were willing to sever our bond over a choice that was right for mom. But I knew I couldn't back down now. During this time, Reddit became my lifeline. The support I received was overwhelming. People shared their stories, offered advice, and reminded me that I was doing the right thing by standing by my mom. Their words gave me strength, validating that I wasn't alone in facing this kind of family turmoil. In the final push to protect mom, I helped her gather and secure important documents, financial statements, property deeds, and anything else dad could try to manipulate. We made sure her accounts were safe, with backups for everything in case he attempted to block her access or freeze her assets. Every step we took felt like another layer of protection, one more step toward freeing her from his grasp. The fractures in our family had deepened, and I could see that there was no way back to how things once were. But seeing mom slowly regain her independence and take control of her life, I knew we were finally heading in the right direction. For the first time, there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and it felt like we were finally moving forward. Update 5. After months of preparation, mom officially filed for divorce. It was a huge step, and one that caused a final uproar in the family. As soon as it became clear that reconciliation was off the table, everything hit the fan. Dad's reaction was immediate. He tried every trick he could think of to regain control. First, he attempted to cut off any remaining financial support, thinking it would make her back down. He underestimated her resolve. Mom had prepared for this, and with the help of her lawyer, she was ready to stand her ground. My siblings weren't so prepared. They continued to pressure both of us, calling me to demand that mom reconsider, accusing us of ruining dad's life by going through with the divorce. They still refused to see that dad had betrayed all of us long before I uncovered the truth. Their loyalty to him was unshaken, and they were willing to sacrifice our relationship to preserve the illusion they held on to so tightly. With the divorce filing, extended family members took sides more openly. During a family gathering, a few of them confronted me directly, accusing me of instigating the whole situation and tearing our family apart. They couldn't understand why I had spoken up, as if the lies and secrets were somehow better than the truth. I listened to them, letting their accusations roll off me, but it hurt to see people I'd grown up with turn their backs like that. Luckily, I had a few close friends who were there for me. They stood by me, offering support and listening to my frustrations without judgment. They reminded me that choosing to support my mom was the right thing, that breaking away from toxic family dynamics was hard but necessary. Having that support outside the family was a relief, especially when everything else felt like it was crumbling. In a heartbreaking turn, my siblings went no contact with me and mom, saying they couldn't support this path. They insisted we were overreacting, that mom was destroying dad's life for no reason. I tried to explain that dad had created this situation through his own actions, but they refused to listen. The pain of losing my siblings was heavy, but I couldn't change their minds. Mom, meanwhile, took a leap toward her new independence. She moved into her own apartment, the first place she'd ever had to herself in decades. It was a bittersweet moment for her. A small apartment, but filled with a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. She began decorating, filling it with things that made her happy: plants, cozy furniture, art she'd always wanted but never bought because dad would have called it unnecessary. Watching her embrace her own space was empowering, and for the first time I saw her smile without a trace of sadness. Therapy was helping me too. Over time I had a breakthrough, recognizing that much of my guilt came from a lifetime of family conditioning, a belief that I was somehow responsible for holding everyone together. Realizing I didn't need to carry that burden forever gave me a new sense of peace. I began to focus on my own mental health, setting boundaries that I hadn't known were possible before all of this started. In a final attempt at reconciliation, I reached out to my siblings, hoping to bridge the gap. I explained my intentions, that I hadn't wanted to tear the family apart, only to bring the truth to light so that everyone could live more honestly. But they didn't respond, leaving my message unanswered. That silence was painful, but I knew I'd done all I could. In court, mom won a portion of the assets dad had tried to hide. The ruling was a small but important victory. It meant that she'd be able to live comfortably without relying on his support. Dad's last-ditch efforts to control her had failed, and for once the scales seemed to tip in her favor. After the verdict, he tried reaching out to me, claiming he wanted to make amends, to rebuild some form of a relationship. But I hesitated, uncertain if I could ever trust him again. After some thought, I decided to respond, but with firm boundaries. I laid it out clearly I wouldn't tolerate any more manipulation or lies. If he wanted to reconnect, he would need to respect my boundaries and understand that the dynamic had changed. He was silent for a while after that, and I didn't push. For now, I'd said my piece. Mom, meanwhile, was thriving. She'd joined a local art group, started meeting new people, and even went on a few trips with her support group. Her spirit was revitalized, and she was finally living a life free of dad's control. Seeing her transformation was like watching a weight lift off her shoulders. She had her own social circle now, friends who respected her for who she was. The contrast to her old life was incredible. In one last post on Reddit, I shared our journey. I reflected on the complexity of breaking free from toxic family dynamics, the toll it took, and the sense of peace that came with finally standing by the truth. The responses were encouraging, with many users sharing similar experiences and offering words of support. It was a strange feeling, bittersweet but cathartic. Knowing our story resonated with others made the struggles feel a little less isolating. In the end, Mom and I decided to move to a new city. We wanted a fresh start, a place without the ghosts of the past lingering in every corner. The move was symbolic, the closing of a painful chapter, and the beginning of something new. It wasn't easy leaving behind people we loved, even those who had turned their backs on us, but we knew it was the right choice. Starting this new life brought a sense of clarity, and though I lost relationships along the way, I gained something much more important, a sense of self-respect and freedom. Mom had her independence, I had my peace, and together, we had a future that no longer depended on anyone else's lies or manipulation.